And stablecoins for me right now is like one of the most important topics in the crypto ecosystem. But sometimes I think that they are underrated. Stablecoins is a way to make the dollar a great way to basically control the global economy.
Or what do you look out for when you think about all these different stablecoin providers that are coming onto the market? When you're choosing or thinking about like engaging with stablecoins, what are the parameters that you think you and others like you are making their decisions upon which ones they choose to work with?
The president of the central bank went to blockchain Rio. Do you think that they care about crypto or they're just like trying to get votes?
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Frontera. Today, we have a very special guest slash not guest. Lalo, welcome to Frontera.
Hey, Kush. First episode in Frontera, and it's kind of funny that this is my first episode. But to be honest, I'm a huge fan on what you guys are doing, like App, Joker, and you building Frontera. I was reading like all the newsletters, and they're so good. And I just finished looking at the SAG episode of Bridge, and it was so good. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. First episode of Frontera. And man, today we have a few things that I love. And stablecoins for me right now is like one of the most important topics in the crypto ecosystem. But sometimes I think that they are underrated. Still, there's a lot of hype, but they're still underrated. In my opinion, stablecoins is the best way of really having like a globalized economy once for all. It's like finally this is the technology that can make this happen. And nobody's talking a lot about it. I think that is underrated. I know that you've been in for example Prospera, that is like a network and a project that is more about like uh, private economies, etc. And I think that in those places makes a lot of sense. But yeah, Kush, I would love to talk about this. This is a thing that is really important for me. And how do you see
Let's
the
cook, man.
stablecoin play? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so much to go into here, right? But you guys run a business built on stable coins. We work with a lot of partners that run businesses on stable coins. We've talked a lot about stable coins on this episode. I think in particular, like if we jump to the essay that we just published last week, right, which is just a little bit of how we think about where are stable coins going, why are they so important, why should countries care a lot more about stable coins. And we also had another conversation with Jack from Checker Finance, for example, and one of the things that we really discussed in this conversation was, okay, how do we ensure that we have this balance where local stablecoins, if they need to thrive, they can do well, whilst also providing people with access to the best sort of capital markets, in which case, dollars are definitely the way to go here. I think the way that and again, it's funny that you would say that you feel that they're underappreciated, because if anything, I feel, at least in the crypto industry, they're totally massively overappreciated, right? Whereas outside of crypto, very few people are talking about it. Did you see this announcement? There was a company that just launched very recently, and their entire sort of launch thesis talked about global dollar bank accounts and how people can access essentially financial services and so forth without even having to necessarily like engage with traditional financial services. So it's called Slash.
Mm.
And it was actually launched by a Venezuelan guy. And Slash, what's interesting is they essentially said, hey, look, you can bank without an LLC. So there are no fees when you move money around. And then you also, there's sort of like a guarantee that your account won't be frozen as well, right? And so this for me is just like a really, really exciting way for people to be able to use money in a way, again, that just like people don't have to know that they're using stable coins. Yeah, so Slash is, they call it business banking for internet entrepreneurs. They just raised, if I'm not mistaken, $30 million, $60 million. And so you can bank without an LLC, right? You don't need to pay hefty fees, and then your account won't get frozen, right? So I think, they're already seeing like $4 billion being spent on their credit cards. Victor
Wow.
Cardenas, he's actually a Venezuelan founder. He's a Teal fellow as well. So, this is exactly the kind of thing that stablecoins unlock, right? And there is, let me just check. Let's just do a quick scan of their website. They talk about stablecoins about a third of the way through the website, and then the rest is fine print. But the rest,
Yeah.
like there is no mention of stablecoins, right? Um, so this for me is like where all of this is going, right? And again, they just raised a 40 million Series B round from Goodwater. So how do you think about this? I mean, we both operate businesses. We both interface with stablecoins. Like, how do you think about sort of what Slash is doing and how this impacts you as an entrepreneur and like what this might unlock for you?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because us as Latinos, I think that we understand the value of stablecoins, but we are the users. Still, I think that investors and builders are just looking at the tip of the iceberg. Just like this type of things like Slash. It's like, yeah, finally, like an account where I can use it anywhere and I can use dollars. Basically, digital dollars. It doesn't matter if it's USDC, if it's USDT, if it's DAI, whatever. Just like I can finally use dollars anywhere. And for us in Latam, we understand this. There's a lot of value. Everyone loves dollars. Like when I was a kid and it was my birthday, my dad gave me money in dollars. It was just like, oh, save these dollars because I knew that if I save in dollars, my money would be appreciated. Like I would have more money in the next year or whatever. And that doesn't happen when I hold Mexican pesos. And I understand we can see this. And actually, in Bando, we're a B2B company. So I normally talk to this type of companies a lot. And we're seeing more experiments like Slash. So there's one called Contigo, there's Cast, there's like a few others, Dollar App, even Bitso tried to make these cards, right? So I think that there's a lot of value in here. And I think that this is exactly what Joker and Nav wrote in the newsletter this week. And I find these newsletters so elegant. They talk a lot about how the stable coins or like digital tokens back to a fiat currency because it can be either to USD or even it can be to gold um, are the best way to make the US great again. For example, it says something about MAGA in the sense
Yeah.
of that stablecoins is a way to make the dollar a great weapon and a great way to basically control the global economy. So let's talk a little bit about that because I think that now that we talk about the stablecoins, the most important thing about the stablecoins that is that stablecoins are back one by one or almost one by one. It can be like 95%, I think, by short-term US treasuries. And
Yeah.
this is the most important thing. And not a lot of people understands all the things that comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like for me, the main takeaway from this is, and it's something that we've discussed as well with App quite a lot too, is there are kind of like geopolitical implications and trying to export the US dollar, right? So we have the BRICS economies that are trying to peel away from and saying, look, we don't no longer need to use the dollar as the kind of reserve currency. The Middle East also every day is less and less incentivized to rely on the dollar, specifically given the poor monetary policy that the US generally rolls out. And by that said, this essentially means that the U.S. is now having to find new places for demand for their dollar. And like as we talk about incessantly on this podcast, essentially the dollar via stablecoins is the best way for people to kind of tap into that for the U.S. to make the most out of it. That's why Genius, I think, was such a landmark piece of regulation as well, because it essentially said, look, it's fine for you to, and we encourage sort of this like innovation around stable coins, but we just need to ensure that like everything is backed one-to-one, that you're being fully compliant, that you're reporting and so on. So, and I think there were a lot of like questions too around like what this would imply for Tether as well. Because Tether's, a business that previously was seen by or claimed to be just like quote unquote shady and whatever. But frankly, they've been quite transparent, right? Especially recently with their holdings and their reserves and so on. But now it's just okay. How do we get and even for consumers and people relying on these stable coins, how do we get as much data around what they're actually up to, right? So How do you like? I'm curious, Lalo, because again, you mentioned you interface a lot with B2B businesses, right? But like, are there particular, or what do you look out for when you think about all these different stablecoin providers that are coming onto the market, right? So you've got USDC, USDT, you've got AUSD, BUSD, et cetera, et cetera. So like, when you're choosing or thinking about like engaging with stablecoins, what are the parameters that you think you and others like you are making their decisions upon which ones they choose to work with?
It's kind of crazy just because for us as builders, we understand that USDC, USDT, PYUSD, for example, the one of PayPal, there are great companies building them, but it's a lot about the branding. So, for example, in LatAm, people tend to know more USDT, and it was just because they were the first ones, and they actually transact a lot on Tron, for example. But if you go to the US and you pitch that you're moving money on USDT on Tron, that would be super sketchy for them, right? So they prefer USDC. Uh, that is like a super compliant company based in the US. They are looking to IPO. Like, well, the IPO was like a few months ago, so it's like they're in the stock market, but also PayPal USD, right? PYUSD. And once you talk to the users, to be honest, if you go to Colombia, they don't care if they hold USDC or they hold USDT. Basically, what they want is hold dollars, and this is US dollars, right? So why? Because local currencies are collapsing. People want dollars, and they don't need a bank to do this. And that's also super important. Like, I was talking to a Korean guy like a year ago, and we're like, we in LatAm, we do not trust banks. And this guy was like, wow, why are you saying that? I think that my money is super safe in my bank. And in LatAm, it's just like, we don't trust banks. I trust more my MetaMask account in my cell phone, or my Ethereum wallet, or even Cast, or these companies that holds USDC for me, and I go to a store and I can pay directly with my Apple Pay. I think that that's what Latinos and people in the global South wants. And actually, in July 2025, the Genius Act formalizes this system, making treasuries the official reserve assets for stablecoins. So it's just like, it's safer to have USDC, knowing that is backed by treasuries of the US, rather than having Mexican pesos backed by Mexican debt, right? Or treasuries in Mexico. So it makes a lot of sense. And now let's talk about the consequences, Kush, because I think that there are a few ones that are super important. It's just like, if people in Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, Ecuador, whatever, we start preferring to hold USDC or USDT or a stablecoin, what's going to happen with local currencies? Like, there are a few options, but I think that this is like, the options are scary, and I think that we should talk about those, because what do? You open the market, or you block the stable coins, or I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
like a really big change.
Yeah, I think for me, with the, maybe it's like the other thing that we explore a lot is like what happens to demand for local stablecoins with a dollarized economy. And I think the way I'm perceiving this is, a it's not that local stablecoins by nature being stablecoins themselves will shift anything necessarily. I think they just like accelerate whatever rate of change had to occur, right? So, if you wanted to get out of Mexican pesos, now it's much easier for you to do it, say but with a local stablecoin, right? If you have local Mexican peso, it's much easier for you now to exit the dollar within certain bounds. Because the other problem that we're seeing with a lot of local stablecoins is the lack of liquidity for them, right? And so
Mm.
oftentimes that will incur massive slippage. So I think banks ultimately will play a really important role in ensuring that there's like a very seamless like experience. And again, the question is like, what are the incentives for banks to actually do that? So we do have some news items as well related to banks too, and it's like an economy that we're oftentimes talking about is Brazil and the Central Bank of Brazil and sort of everything that they're up to. we just had this big conference that is went down over the course of the last couple of days in Brazil. So yeah, I'd love to jam with you a little bit on how you're thinking about this.
I think this is kind of crazy. So let's put this scenario, right? So in Africa, Southeast Asia, LatAms, if we start using USDC or stable coins, it's like a colonization that we want. And that's crazy because it's just like, yeah, I prefer to hold USD on my wallet rather than Mexican peso. And this is what I decide to do so. So normally colonization is just like with war and like one powerful empire, I don't know, attacking the weakest. This is from the inside, and this is kind of crazy just because I prefer to do so, and I'm gonna find a way to do it. So there are a few consequences. It comes a loss of monetary control by the governments in those local places. And I think that there are three options. One is like you build a wall. So it's like you overregulate stable coins. That I don't think that that works. I mean, Brazil is trying. Nigeria was trying too. Um, Bans don't work when people want stable money. It's just like they find a way to do so. And Argentina is the perfect example. It was just like, oh, if you overregulate dollars, people are gonna find a way to get the thing that they want. And that's how black markets are created. So then the second option is you join the empire, you adopt the USD, fully like Panama or El Salvador. You kill inflation, but you also kill sovereignty. It's just like your central banks become irrelevant. Your economy syncs with the Fed. So that's kind of crazy. It's just like your economy doesn't depend on you, it depends on the US. And the US are going to see for the best interest. They don't care about the best interest of El Salvador or Panama or whatever. And the option three is like you take a chance, you adopt a hedge asset like gold or Bitcoin, just like El Salvador did. And we're going to talk about Bukele later. But it's just like, yeah, Bitcoins offer scarcity, censorship resistance, and monetary independence. So El Salvador is a really interesting experiment on the option three. But yeah, I think that we're seeing a shift on the economy globally, and I think that governments needs to move fast. So, what are your take on this? I would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you laid it out right. It's like either governments are gonna move closer to stable coins and DeFi and crypto, or they won't, and the ones that don't will just become less and less relevant in kind of global economic scales, right? It's like one of the theses that we hold really high at Alicia is that all money will come on chain because it's just the best way of moving money around the entire sort of ecosystem, right? So, yeah,
What do you think is going to happen to local currencies?
I think the long tail of local currencies will really struggle as they already are, right? Like the Bolivariano or the Bolivar is struggling, for example, right? We have seen the Venezuelan currency also struggle, and I think there's also, but there's some exceptions to that, right? Like we've talked previously on the show about the Guatemalan Quetzal, and the Guatemalan Quetzal has remained between $7 and $8 for the last 20 years. For as long as I can remember, the Quetzal was at that price point, and the only reason that has happened is because we have 18% of Guatemala's GDP comes by way of remittance flows from the US. So we have this constant injection of dollars coming into the economy, which allows us to have a really strong currency compared to most other currencies in the region, right? So and
How
very
adopted
stable
is
as
the
well.
dollars in Guatemala? So, can you
Very
go
little.
anywhere?
No,
Oh, very little.
very little. Yeah, I mean, like most people accept it. Oftentimes, a really low conversion rate. So you're just oftentimes benefited by using the Guatemalan Quetzal, right? So it's like actually a really strong currency. Um, and I think that for me, I think it's also just important to ensure that we have I'm just a fan of like plurality, and I think generally it's best if we have a number of different like economic vehicles out there that people can choose from, right? I think there's also like the argument of hyper Bitcoinization as well, which is like everything will be denominated in Sats, and that might be like a future that we head down towards too. But I'm still waiting for that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Um,
I don't think that Bitcoin is going to become money. It's just like a hedge. and a reserve way of having wealth. But I think about money as just stable coins. And this is interesting. And I think that we should talk about this. It's just like digitalizing the dollar is a way to export US debt, and emerging economies, they won't be able to respond, in my opinion. It's just like, how do you stop adoption?
Yeah. I think it's kind of impossible, right? Like, I think that, like, even if you try to legislate it away, again, yeah, I mean, there are a number of cases, like Venezuela is an interesting one, Bolivia as well, where there's like government pushback. Bolivia, for the longest time, crypto was illegal. And then they had
Mm.
to do a complete 180 because they were running out of dollars. And they're like, we need stable coins. And so, I think that we are seeing just historical trends of this emergence or proximity towards crypto, right? Because it's just open and permissionless systems that ultimately win.
So yeah, I think that the stablecoin part is just gonna be like super interesting. And we as Latinos, I think that we have the DNA to be able to move through this and to adopt the dollar in a really simple way. And those that doesn't, I think that they're gonna suffer a lot. So now, Kush, let's talk about the president of the central bank went to blockchain Rio. So that was interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts on how politicians are like. Do you think that they care about crypto, or they're just like trying to get votes?
I mean, I think Brazil's like that economy that we've always, referred to as being the most advanced in Latin America when it comes to crypto regulation, right? And so, blockchain Rio, I think, had a quite a like big institutional focus. A lot of friends were there, and I think the premise here is, yeah, Galipolo basically, Campos Neto, who was the previous um, head of the Bank of the Brazil, essentially, went last year. They came this year, and they know very well that this is where the future is heading, and they know they have to get close to the institution. So, I think this is just so exciting. And I think Brazil's developing the Drex stablecoin, and I think we'll see like hopefully an aperture for them to not just be completely tied into um, to the kind of CBDC route, but rather want to open up innovation. Because for me, it's oftentimes the question that I ask myself is like, why are you bothering to do these things on like private blockchains? If nobody can run a node, nobody can verify the data, like please just run it on like Google Sheets, save everybody time and energy. Because if there isn't like an interoperable kind of ecosystem that allows you to tap into the innovations and advancements of DeFi, then I don't know, a lot of these things I'm not that excited by. But how do you think about this like balance between governments wanting to engage and private blockchains, and how do we make sure that we can accelerate the adoption and bringing all of the world's money on chain?
Yeah, I think that politicians are gonna make whatever they need to do to win votes. Like a few years ago, they were against crypto, and we can remember, like in the US, that they were doing a crypto army against crypto, and now everyone is just like talking about it. And I think that right now is like the crypto game, but in the past it was the internet game. It was just like there were some politicians against internet, some in favor. I think that you cannot go against tech. I think that that's it. It's just like if you adopt technology in the right way, I think you're making a favor to the country, right? And if you're a politician and your goal is to do well to your country, I think that you should adopt crypto in a good way. So I think that this is a good step. It's just like announcing that the government is like pro crypto, and actually Brazil is, I would say, is the most advanced country in Latin America on crypto legislation and also technology in general. So for example, the Brazilian stock exchange, they launch Bitcoin options, even sell futures. So we know Brazilians are super into trading, into investing. So I think it makes sense, and I would love to see this in other countries in LatAm. And now let's talk a little bit about um, El Salvador, because we just mentioned that El Salvador made a really interesting bet on adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender, and now Nayib Bukele is gonna be able to get re-election indefinitely. So this could be like a really good game or an awful bet. So what are your thoughts? Because Kush, this could be really good or awful for the nation.
Yeah, the story here is that there's a bill that passed on July 31st, so a week ago, that essentially enables the indefinite re-election of the president, extends the terms from 5 to 6 years, and then removes the need for second round runoffs in elections. So, okay, here's the thing though, right? Is like Bukele is absolutely crushing it. Like he's doing overall a really, really, really good job in the country. The problem is that it's you start putting up some questions around the extent to which like does this eventually become a dictator? Like all dictators start off with good intentions and things are going really well and they're populist and people love them. I think that the story here is like, what does this mean for Bitcoin? If Bukele were to stay in power, in theory, that's really bullish for Bitcoin, right? It just means that he can continue this legacy of, hey, we want to become a crypto forward nation. Um, you know, I just, I sincerely hope that he doesn't get lost in the power, because I think that can very easily happen to any leader. Even if you have the best intentions, you could very
I
easily get
completely
wrapped up.
agree.
Yeah.
It's just like is this Batman quote that says you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right? It's just like, what about if you leave the government right now? It's just like you end your period, you were like one of the best presidents in history ever, and that's it. And now it's just like he's going to this super complicated route. I mean, hopefully he makes the right decisions and take El Salvador to the right way as he is doing, but I'm not a fan of of
Yeah.
dictators.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I was just there in El Salvador when they were, and people were talking, like I was there about a month ago, and people were saying, oh, it's his brother that's going to run for election. It's his wife, and but which is like, okay, fine. Like at least that he's kind of the shadow, kind of like president. So I don't know what's preferable. Is it like the shadow president that's ruling through his wife, or is it this like, oh, we don't need elections anymore, kind of thing? So
Yeah,
we'll see.
I think that is always like to have the president on power, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Shadows are always awful. So let's move to the last one. And BitGet launched this report, PayFi Unlocked Crypto Payments Use Cases, and I think it was pretty interesting. Kush, let's talk about it. And which were your first impressions of this?
yeah. Yeah, so this is basically this like massive report that BitGet launched, and they surveyed. It was based on like 4,600 users. Bear in mind that it's not like this data is very robust, right? So as we talk through some of this, just take a pinch of salt. So Latin America, for example, 3% out of the 4,500 or 4,600 people that were interviewed were from Latin America. So as we talk about specifically like the statistics there, so 138 people. It's like very, very small subset. But this report essentially just like explores how are people using crypto, where, and I think for you as Bando as well, I think this is really interesting data. Like, what are
Yeah.
people actually doing with their crypto, right? And so if we scroll down like this report, right, we can see Latin America tops for digital product purchases, right, and online shopping. And I know you guys did a massive campaign for the Amazon like Prime Day, right? And I know that drove a ton of volume for you guys, right? So yeah,
Yeah, it
here you can
was
see. I'm
it
curious,
was
like,
it was
just
just pretty
yeah,
interesting. And let's
go
talk
for
a
it.
little bit about it. It's just because I was looking at this data and it makes a lot of sense. So, for example, uh, we're launching 8 of 8 in Philippines. It's just like 8 of 8 is like their national Black Friday day in Philippines. And they're super into gaming. They're into digital products purchases. When we did the Amazon Prime Day in Mexico, obviously a lot of purchases were done in Amazon, but in general, as it says here, it's just like global crypto wallets use cases and payments are for gaming, daily purchases like Amazon, or we're live in Nigeria as well, and a lot of users use us to go to Spar. it was kind of weird for me that I didn't see, or maybe it's just another category, but just like airtime and data is huge. Buying airtime and data in Southeast Asia, in Africa, it's just like a really big use case for spending in crypto. But Kush, to be honest, I think that this data makes a lot of sense, and it's what we have seen in Bando.
Does do you think like data, does that fall under like daily purchases, or because I totally agree, right? Like airtime is massive, or is it like I don't know, online shopping? Like why are we not seeing data on here? Subscription services maybe? I'm not sure. It's like it is
Yeah,
strange to not
maybe.
see it on there.
But also this distinction between categories. It's just like between Gen Z's, millennials, and Gen X. Just like we know Gen Z's, they tend to game a lot, like use gaming and play Xbox and whatever. But Gen X, it's 40% traveling. So yeah, I think that this report makes a lot of sense. I know that, as you mentioned, like data, it can always be like kind of sketchy whenever you interview less than 10,000 users, for example, for this. But I think that it's kind of accurate. And I think that payments and stablecoins are just going to be like the best use cases for crypto in the next upcoming years. So I just
Totally agree.
said stablecoins and payments. Do you have any other, Kush?
No, I think DeFi, man. Like I'm so excited about DeFi and like what DeFi unlocks as well. Mainly like for traditional financial markets too. But no, I think this particular report, like helpful data, take it with a grain of salt because it's also very narrow to like BitGet users, right? So it's like just BitGet users, very few people. But still, I think as data nerds, I think we're always trying to like, okay, what can we draw on here? Like what is relevant and what should we be looking further into? And I definitely think like the gaming angle is super critical there. Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Lalo, this has been an awesome podcast, man. Like really, really happy to have you on here. I'm always happy to do like Odisea, Espacio Crypto jams too. And that's how Frontera came to be as well, man. So what are you most looking forward to this week? Like what are you looking forward to specifically the stablecoin conference? We're obviously official partners. So yeah, how are you seeing that?
For me, it's kind of crazy how LATAM has grown in the last years, and it's like the lineup, the speakers are top class. It's not just like another conference tier B or tier C. For me, it's like top class conference, institutional conference. It's not only like for communities or whatever. This is more about um, companies talking about stablecoins exactly, and also I think that we're gonna see a lot of companies looking for opportunities in LATAM. So I'm excited about that. I'm super focused on this type of spending and stable coins. So yeah, I think it's most about like connecting to global companies wanting to expand to Latin America. But what about you, Kush? You're coming, you're everywhere. So why did you prioritize this conference?
Yeah, so I think for me, the critical, why the stablecoin conference matters is one, it's being hosted by Bitso, one of the top 3 most important crypto companies in the region. They very early on asked us to be partners for the conference, and we said yes right away. And yeah, I mean, I think just being able to like connect and accelerate a lot of the engagement with the partners there, I think is gonna be huge. So super excited. Thank you for stepping in here as well, Lalo. Looking forward to next steps and making things happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kush. You can follow me on Twitter as Lalo Crypto. You can follow Kush as 0x Kush. And thanks for the invite in Frontera. I really enjoyed
Let's
it.
go. All right. Peace.